Good evening and welcome to NewsNight. My name is India Durham. Tonight we'll cover all your international, national, and local news. Find out more about a deadly explosion that shook the lives of Turkish citizens. Also hear more about the growing issues within the National Football League. Plus, we will have all the information on an annual auction held at the Pittsburgh International Airport, as well as what group of spry individuals broke a new record. All this and more coming up on NewsNight. On October 14th, a coal mine explosion occurred in northern Turkey, killing 41 people and injuring 11. Around 110 people were doing their daily work at a coal mine, unknowingly realizing the life-taking and life-threatening disaster that was soon to occur. Deputy Chairman of the Justice and Development Party, Solomon Solu, said, quote, "It is believed to have occurred at around 300 meters deep. At the time, some 49 people had been working in the risky zone between 300 and 350 meters underground," end quote. For most, there was no way to survive. Sometime after the explosion, some of the miners' family members arrived at the scene, anxiously waiting and hoping that their loved one made it out alive. According to Reuters News, quote, Energy Minister Faith Donmez said that the initial indications were that the blast was caused by a fire damp, a term referring to methane in coal mines, end quote. No other information has been reported. The painting Sunflower, created by Vincent van Gogh in 1888, is one of the London National Gallery's prized possessions. However, a recent protest posed a threat to Van Gogh's masterpiece. Reporter Devin Amee has more on the case.
At London's National Gallery, two protesters created a scene in front of Van Gogh's famous portrait, Sunflowers. The protesters threw what appeared to be tomato soup at the painting moments before kneeling on the ground and gluing their hands to the wall underneath the frame. They were a group called Just Stop Oil, founded in England in February 2022 with the aim to, quote, ensure the UK government commits to halting new fossil fuel licensing and production, end quote. At first, the throwing of tomato soup was very confusing. However, one protester stated, quote, "Are you more concerned about the protection of the painting or the protection of the planet and our people? The cost of living crisis is part of the cost of oil crisis. Fuel is unaffordable to millions of cold, hungry families. They can't even afford to heat a tin of soup," end quote. The protesters were arrested with charges of criminal damage and aggravated trespass, according to the London police. The painting was taken off display for 6 hours in order to clean it from the soupy mess. Luckily, the masterpiece is covered in glass, therefore it took no damage.
Reporter Salvatore Lea is here to give the rundown on the rising conflict between the nation of Ukraine and entrepreneur Elon Musk. Salvatore?
Thanks, India. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced that his company will be withdrawing its request to the Pentagon for funding of his Starlink program over Ukraine. This comes after making several Twitter polls and tweets suggesting Ukraine cede Crimea and the eastern sections claimed by Russia in an effort for peace. This has angered many in Ukraine, including President Volodymyr Zelensky, who made a Twitter poll of his own asking, quote, "Which Elon Musk do you like more? One who supports Ukraine or one who supports Russia?" End quote. This also caught the ire of Ukraine's ambassador to Germany, Andriy Melnik, who so eloquently put it, quote, "F off is my diplomatic response to you," end quote, when regarding Musk's Twitter statements. For those unaware, Starlink is a satellite-provided internet service that many in Ukraine have been relying on due to Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure, such as schools, hospitals, electric substations, and housing. The upkeep of the infrastructure needed for Starlink was being funded by the United States government, but after his disagreements with the Ukrainian government and his suspected support for Putin and the Russian state, decided to pull funding and leave the Ukrainian people to their own fate without connection to the outside world.
Across the pond, a growing sense of concern rattles the citizens of the United Kingdom regarding the new Prime Minister's most recent decisions. Reporter Callie-Ann Winder has more.
Concern arises in the UK as the recently appointed Prime Minister, Liz Truss, loses credibility by reversing her pledge to impose tax cuts. She also nobly fired her Finance Minister, Kwasi Kwarteng, as a partner in her recent mini-budget that interrupted financial markets and affected the value of the pound. This brought criticism from her investors, global economic agencies, and other members of parliament within the Conservative Party. This hiccup created infighting within the party, which allowed the opposing Labour Party to snatch the lead for the upcoming 2024 election by 30%. As debt rises in the UK, Truss's reign remains rocky as many citizens and members of parliament are opposed to her new platform of increasing corporate taxes and her recent hire of Jeremy Hunt for finance minister. While the future of the UK government is undetermined, one thing we do know is Truss's reign is growing questionable to its citizens.
On Sunday, October 9th, a landslide in Venezuela killed at least 39 people and left over 50 missing as of Friday the 14th. Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela's leader, announced that the tragedy took place in the north-central state of Aragua, Venezuela. The landslide came down in the Santos Michelena municipality after days of heavy rainfall. At least 1,300 families have been affected by the tragedy in some way. An emergency fund has been made available for survivors. After the break, hear more about the multiple missing person reports that are now officially murder investigations. Also, stay tuned to hear about the devastating fire raging in Washington state. We'll be right back.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening and welcome back to NewsNight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more.
All this and more.
All this and more coming up on NewsNight.
Coming up on NewsNight.
Coming up on NewsNight.
On October 13th, Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland school gunman, appeared in court in regard to his imprisonment sentencing. With the votes of the jurors involved in the case, the final vote was that Cruz would not be receiving the death penalty, but instead a life sentence without parole. This, of course, devastated the families of whom were present in court. On February of 2018, 17 lives were taken, 14 students and 3 staff members in a school located in Parkland, Florida. It has been 4 years since this incident and since the families of those victims lost their loved ones. Fury arises in the courtroom after hearing the sentencing. Families are in disbelief and still feel that justice has not been served for their loved ones. According to the New York Times, quote, a juror who voted against the death penalty said in a note to the judge on Thursday that she had been fair and unbiased, end quote. It was reported that some of the other jurors were unhappy with her vote. 4 dismayed bodies were found in an Oklahoma river last week, turning 4 missing person cases into murder investigations. Mark Chastain, Billy Chastain, Mike Sparks, and Alex Stevens' bodies were found in a river in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, after being reported missing on October 9th. All 4 men suffered gunshot wounds before being dismembered, with the official cause of death still unknown. According to authorities, the group of 4 was planning to commit some kind of crime, citing a witness who reported that he was invited to join the men to, quote, hit a lick big enough for all of them, end quote. The nature of the crime is unclear. However, with no definite plans or instructions being found, the police are currently in search of one person of interest, a stranger to the group, but a possible suspect of the police after he has gone missing and is possibly suicidal. It has been a year and a half since the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol, and after strenuous investigations, a subpoena has been issued. Reporter Salvatore Leah has the story.
This past Thursday, the House committee investigating the January 6th attack chose to subpoena former President Donald Trump. The committee would like to question the former president about his knowledge of the attempted coup and any role he may have played in the days leading up to and following. This is the culmination of a year and a half of investigation which saw countless testimony from poll workers, members of Congress, and local politicians, while also reviewing footage and audio from the days surrounding the attack, many of which were recordings of the former president seeking support from various leaders in an effort to cinch a victory in the 2020 election. The day following his subpoena, Trump released a 14-page letter directed to the committee chair, which he opened up with, quote, "The presidential election of 2020 was rigged and stolen," end quote, in all caps to express his frustration. The letter also reiterates his anger over past events such as the Mueller report, while also suggesting that the Capitol rioters were in fact left-wing saboteurs, a popular conspiracy amongst right-wing circles. It is unclear whether the former president will answer the subpoena nor what the outcome of these hearings will be, but with new layers being uncovered each day, let us only hope that the history books will have the facts of that fateful day.
The National Football League is receiving criticism for its lack of representation of minority groups within their higher-ranking positions. Reporter Callion Winder has more on this topic.
Diversity is no stranger to the growing employment of sports players, many of which are people of color. Out of all the players in the National Football League, 60% are made up of black players alone. However, the NFL has come up under fire for their poor treatment of minority groups within their higher rankings of the league. Only an outstanding of 3 of 32 head coaches are black. 6 out of 32 are specifically people of color. In college football, 314 on-field coaches are people of color out of 722. Even with its outstanding number of black players, head positions within the league are left unchecked power and biases in the interviewing process, which excludes many people of color. NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations Troy Vincent said in quote, "Black coaches are fired, qualified black candidates are passed over, and teams accused of gaming the interview requirement with no fear of consequences," end quote. Even as programs and initiatives like Rodney Rule in 2003, which enforced at least one minority candidate for every head coach opening, are left ignored by their higher-ups. Some excuses by the league included that black interviewees either didn't interview well or didn't look the part. The reasoning pales in comparison to the hundreds of black qualified interviewees, as expressed by Vincent himself. The cost of the lack of diversity affects 60% of black players within the NFL that lose valuable mentors and role models, affecting their overall mindset throughout their careers. These situations are coming to light now more than ever as statistics and biases of specific NFL higher-ups are brought to the public. It now remains as an ongoing issue that people like Troy Vincent and the continuing investigation by the Washington Post are hoping to change.
On Sunday, October 16th, the Nakia Creek fire exploded from 156 acres to 2,000 acres in just a matter of hours. The fire was burning in the Yacolt Burn State Forest in the state of Washington. The fire began on October 9th on Larch Mountain. The fierce winds and unusually high temperatures in the area caused the fire to grow. Severe winds made it difficult to contain the fire. Only 5% of the flames could be put out by Sunday night. Clark Regional Emergency Services Agency stated in an evening update, quote, "The easterly winds were so strong today that air assets were grounded at times for safety," end quote. A red flag warning was out for nearby areas due to heat and dry winds. About 3,000 homes were forced to evacuate and thousands more were told to prepare to leave. This week presents potential fire weather, the Emergency Services Agency said. On the bright side, rain is predicted over the weekend for this location to hopefully help out. Back from this break, we will have all of your local Pittsburgh news. Find out more about a woman charged with homicide after a fatal stranding of a gunshot victim. Also, you won't want to miss the interview with one of our very own Point Park faculty members who just released a new book. Stay tuned. On October 14th, a woman now facing a homicide charge was accused of driving away from a shooting victim early that week. There has been no evidence that the woman was the one who shot the victim. The male body was found lying in the street of Washington Avenue. Officials marked this case as, quote, a homicide in conspiracy. Jason Walsh, Washington County District Attorney, said, quote, you don't have to pull the trigger in order to be guilty of this crime. The woman at first was charged with tampering with evidence and recklessly endangering another person. As investigations continued, the charges against her increased. The incident occurred in Finleyville in a Bob Tavern's parking lot. Sources say that after following investigations, the male victim was involved in a fight at a bar located in Monongahela. After getting kicked out of the bar, the man proceeded to go to Bob Tavern's. The woman told police the man fell out of her car while she was driving. She also admitted to not stopping the car and helping the victim, but instead continued to keep driving. The man was found not too far from the incident and was pronounced dead on scene. Sources say that the woman's bail has been denied. A SkyTrack telehandler fell over into two workers on Wednesday, September 12th. The incident occurred in Jefferson Hills around 4:24 p.m. The telehandler, which is a type of forklift for moving heavy objects, fell over while trying to install a swimming pool. Chris Bailey, owner of C.A. Bailey Excavating and Hauling, said, quote, when it toppled over, it was almost like I was airborne for 10 minutes. I was in the air, but inside the machine holding onto the steering wheel. When it hit the ground, it threw me into the row bar and through the window, end quote. Bailey's company was subcontracted by Skyview Pools to install the pool. The telehandler is 12,000 pounds, which is 4 times the weight of the pool, so there shouldn't have been an issue. It was also harnessed with 4 nylon strings. One of the workers tried to redirect the pool towards the hole it would go back into, but it swung back into the opposite direction, causing the telehandler to topple over. Skyview Pools and Spas issued a statement that said, quote, both men are doing well and resting. No other details to be released, end quote. Ever wonder what happens to your belongings if you ever leave them at the airport? Reporter Devin Amee is here to tell you all about Pittsburgh International Airport's annual auction.
Over 8,000 items are to be auctioned off at Pittsburgh International Airport on October 22nd. Roughly anything can be found, including 11 cars, as well as everything still inside. Other things up for auction are hundreds of electronics and some strange items, such as instruments. All of these items were things that had been turned into the lost and found and were never claimed. Pittsburgh Airport is one of the only airports across the country to auction off forgotten items, and is now looking at its 12th year of doing so. All proceeds go to the airport's charitable foundations, and it will be held on October 22nd in the Heavy Equipment Building on Cargo Road. The doors will open at 8:30 a.m., bidding on lost and found items will start at 10 a.m., and bidding on vehicles and equipment will begin at noon. If you are unable to make it to the event, but still want to try your luck, you can find more information and access to online bidding at joerpyleauctions.com. All sales are final.
Point Park Center for Media Innovation was founded by its current director, Dr. Andrew Conti, referred to as Andy by his students. He is always open to helping students achieve their career and academic goals. NewsNight reporter Zoe Angelucci spoke to him about his new book entitled Death of the Daily News. Here's the scoop.
Hello, I'm Zoe Angelucci, and welcome to a special segment of NewsNight. From working as a journalist at the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review to winning a multitude of awards from the Pennsylvania Society of Professional Journalists and the Press Club of Western Pennsylvania, Dr. Andrew Conti is one of Point Park's most experienced educators. Last month, for the 4th time, he has published a nonfiction novel. This novel, Death of the Daily News, covers the trials and tribulations of a local town being affected by the discontinuation of their local newspaper. Today, I'm here with Andy, the founder and director of the Point Park University Center for Media Innovation, to speak more about his work on the novel. Hi, Andy.
Hey, Zoe. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So how long have you been working on this novel?
Oh, wow, a long time. It was part of my doctoral dissertation, and so I did that for 3 years, and then I probably spent another 1.5 years working on the book project after that. So it's been a while.
Great. Yeah. So obviously you've been in journalism for a while, in and out of the newsroom. So how did you take on, what inspired you to do this story?
So I was a journalist for many years at the Tribune Review, and I was an investigative reporter, and it became clear around the mid-2000s that local journalism was really suffering. And Pittsburgh had been insulated from it for a while, but I became into, I mean, it's been really hard. You see, like, this disruption that's happened has forced a lot of my friends out of the business. A lot of institutions like the Daily News have gone away, and our communities have been really mired in misinformation and disinformation. And so I was interested in figuring out, like, what actually happens in one of these communities and what can we do to help people do a better job of, saving local news.
Right, so how has your work in there, and then you saw this firsthand, you saw the issue, so how did that help your process to tell the story of the community of, well, specifically McKeesport, but because that's what the book centers on, but other...
Yeah, so it all really grows out of our work here at the center and our work at Point Park, because the center opened with this idea of what does local journalism look like for now and also in the future, both the news delivery side, but also how to sustain it, how to pay for it. And so we started a project in McKeesport many years ago, working with citizens on telling the stories of their communities. And I did my research on that because we were there and I was really interested in it. And then, what we've seen has been this incredible, a turnaround. What happened was, and I think it's going to be true for a lot of these communities, you have like one large news organization that goes away, but then lots of little things start coming up to replace it. So in McKeesport, you've got people sharing conversations with each other, just like we're doing right now. But then people also going to social media. So there's something like 70 different Facebook groups in the Mon Valley, including a half dozen that are all about news. One's actually called the Daily News Facebook group. They're like, since we don't have a Daily News anymore, just go to this Facebook group. And then there's an online newsletter, an online news site, and then there's also a newspaper from Monessen, and they've opened a bureau in McKeesport. So there's not like any one solution that's going to fix the problem, but it's lots of little things, people being creative.
Right. Yeah. So what has kind of been some challenges while writing this, or even just in general with the news deserts?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge has been this disruption, right? Like, there was a model for local news that worked for over 150, 200 years. You go back, I talk about, things that happened hundreds of years ago, people saying how newspapers were the key part of their lives. And it was because, you would get all these eyeballs in your newspaper and then you'd sell advertising for it. And the people, who did that made lots and lots of money. But they also controlled the information that we found out. And so what's happened now is that we all have a say in our local news. Like, we have a control over figuring out what information we consume and what we share with the people around us. And so I talk about the Peter Parker principle, like Spider-Man. So with great power comes great responsibility. And so we've all been given this incredible power to, if you have a smartphone, you're a broadcaster or a publisher, use it wisely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you hope this novel accomplishes?
Before you continue real quick, can you move your hair off the mic?
Oh shoot, sorry.
Is she talking to me?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we need to redo anything?
You can go.
Okay. So what do you hope to accomplish with this novel?
Yeah, so we know a lot about news deserts from like the big national level. There's researchers out there. Penny Abernathy at Northwestern University has done a study to show that they're growing across the country, but we haven't really known what goes on inside one of them. And so that's what this book seeks to do, is like figure out on the ground what happens when a newspaper closes, and also give some guidance to help people figure out how to do a better job of it. So the big two takeaways are, I'm hoping people will, one, take information sharing more seriously. Like, everybody tweets and they put stuff on social media and Facebook, and they're like, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, whatever. Just share your thoughts because it doesn't matter. It does matter. Like, these are our community conversations. And then once people start to accept that it is important, I want to, help us as journalists, I think, have a role to help people do a better job of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously now you're the director of the CMI at Point Park University.
Yes.
You teach a bunch of students here too. So how are you going to use this as a resource for teaching future journalists and future people who are going to be worried about news deserts?
Yeah. So, we have a project in McKeesport, so the McKeesport Community Newsroom. I would love to get more students involved in it. I think that would be amazing. For lots of reasons, that hasn't happened. But hopefully that will happen going forward. I think the other piece is that we have had, there have been interactions, like a former student, Matt Petrus, who came out of Point Park. He helps teach one of our Tube City Writers groups down there. He shows up, and he's worked with young people in the community too, and so that's been a positive. And then we've had several young people from the community who've gone on to university. One of them came here to Point Park, started last year, and another is studying journalism at Howard University this fall. And so those kinds of connections, I think, will continue to grow out of it. And then for my students here, bring it into the classroom and show them, like, hey, there are opportunities and there is a future for local storytelling. And hopefully I can convince more of them to go into jobs doing it too. So,
yes, that's great. So speaking of which, how do you suggest that the new generation of journalists help this problem?
Yeah, so I think the key is that people your age come into school already knowing the technology. Like my students the other day were debating like when they made their first package, and this one woman was like, well, I made my first package when I was in 4th grade. So like, on her phone, she how to do that. But the question is, like, how do we then help you gain the skills to do good interviewing and to do good storytelling, to find out multiple perspectives and to ask good questions and to dig for the truth and to tell these stories. And I hope that our students will be inspired by this moment of change that's going on, because I think it is a super exciting time that we live in. And hopefully, some of you will go on to, to tell stories in your own way, whether that's in local journalism or at a traditional news outlet or starting your own or going and figuring it out at, a nonprofit or whatever organization you're at. You're all storytellers. And so I'm so excited to see you go out in the world and kill it.
Right. So, Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Thanks, Zoe and Andy. Death of the Daily News is now available from the University of Pittsburgh's press website as well as on Nook and Kindle. For a hard copy, you can pick one up at the Point Park bookstore right here on campus. A shots fired call escalated into a police chase and then a crash last Friday morning. Dormont police were called to the 2800th block of Broadway Avenue at 4:28 a.m. Friday morning for shots fired. Investigators found a confrontation that turned into a physical fight before an exchange of gunfire outside of a home. Police said once officers got to the scene, they saw a car take off. Officers attempted to stop the car on West Liberty Avenue, but lost sight of it. Allegheny County Police said that there was a white Chevrolet Camaro was found crashed on the Liberty Bridge near the ramp of the Boulevard of the Allies in the city roughly 15 minutes after the original call. Police said 3 out of the 4 people inside the vehicle have non-life-threatening injuries and are in the hospital. The 4th person in the car was not injured. The Liberty Bridge was closed in the immediate aftermath of the crash. There were no reported injuries from the gunfire exchange. Police and several other people not in the white Chevrolet Camaro also took off from the scene once officers arrived. The situation is currently under investigation. Coming up after the break, find out more about an unexpected group of record-breaking skydivers. Also, sit tight as we give you your daily and weekly weather updates. We'll be right back.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to NewsNight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more.
All this and more.
All this and more coming up on NewsNight.
Coming up on NewsNight.
Coming up on NewsNight.
skydivers all over the age of 80 have set the world record for the largest skydiving formation over 80 years old in Florida. The team was a part of the Jumpers Over 8 Society known as JOES. The jump was a part of a 3-day event for the International Skydiving Hall of Fame celebration at Skydive the Land. The plane and multiple photographers were provided by the company to verify the jump for the Guinness Book of World Records. The Precious Jumpers Over 80 record was a formation of 6 people. Cliff David, one of the 8 jumpers, said, quote, "Achieving our goal to break and set the new world record for the formation of the jumpers over the age of 80 is a testament to the teamwork, experience, and skill of the team members and support staff," end quote. Is it finally time to pull out your hats and gloves? Or will we have one final blast of warmth before winter comes? Reporter Erin Yude is here to give your daily and weekly Pittsburgh weather report. Erin?
It has definitely been a brisk week so far in the Burgh. However, temperatures are expected to rise tomorrow, reaching a high of 53 degrees by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The forecast also calls for a partly cloudy sky throughout the day with a very low chance of rain. As night falls, so does the temperature. The expected low is to be in the mid-30s by tomorrow night with an expected wind chill. The cloud coverage will be high, reaching the 60% range. However, there continues to be a low probability of rain. Now on to our weekly weather forecast. This upcoming week will be a complete turnaround from this past week's very chilly days. Throughout the week, expect to see the sun shining and high temperatures ranging from the high 60s to the low 70s. The chance of precipitation is low, so I'd say expect nothing but pleasantly sunny days. Enjoy the beautiful fall weather as it lasts. If this past week has shown us anything, it'd be to prepare for a bitter cold winter. That's all I have for you this week. Back to you, India.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of NewsNight. If you want to see more, check out our social media pages on both Facebook and Instagram at UView Television. You can also check out more episodes on our YouTube channel or our website, uview.pointpark.edu. I'm India Durham, and from everyone here at NewsNight, thank you for watching and have a great evening.